Hey Optimancers, Chris here. So when we see wizards, sorcerers, warlocks, mages, witches, and other spellcasters in television or movies, what do we see? For the most part, blasting. Energy blasts, fireballs, lightning storms, mana bursts, and the like. Blasting is absolutely iconic to spellcasting. Yet I have recommended against spellcasting characters that focus mainly on spells to focus on blasting spells. Why is that? I mean, who doesn't love that first time their character gets and casts Fireball? That huge area, all those d6s, and enemies are heavily impacted by this spell. In some cases, they're destroyed outright. Even at first level, get a couple goblins in that Thunder Wave, and they may be destroyed completely with a single spell. You can't really argue that those goblins just got shut down as effectively as any spell you could have hoped to cast. And what about high level, when you get that ultimate blast? Meteor Swarm, and enemies over a massive area have burning death spheres raining down from above over armies of enemies, decimating entire forces of foes. Isn't that effective? Doesn't it feel great? Isn't it fun? And of course it's fun. Those moments are great as a spellcaster, and these kinds of spells can be really effective and worth having in your spellcasting mix some of the time. But as a focus, or at least a main focus, for a spellcasting character in a long-term campaign, they simply don't work that way most of the time. Most of the time, the blast spells eat up your spell slots too fast, for too little effect, and they tend to feel worse and worse, and provide diminishing levels of fun through most of a long-term campaign. The problem isn't that you simply haven't been able to enjoy the rush as the same as when you threw that first fireball, because it's not you. It's the spells that are letting you down. In today's video, I'll go through why blast spells in D&D simply fail from a design standpoint to remain useful as our spellcaster moves through their career. And why, if you focus on blasting spells, you're essentially guaranteed to have a feeling of diminishing power, which is the opposite of what most spellcasters usually provide to us as players, because the design of these spells has ensured that the results will be less dramatic as we achieve new levels of power. Now, whenever I do this kind of video, I'm likely to get some responses from players who are upset that I'm telling them what to do or how they're allowed to have fun. Let me assure you that what I'm going to present today are simply some mathematical facts and figures, and I'll provide my opinions and recommendations based on those facts and figures. If you watch this and you don't come to the same conclusions I do, then by no means am I saying you're wrong. Play D&D, have fun, your way. This channel's for game evaluation, not player evaluation. Play the character that's fun to you. But hopefully you will have some more information at your disposal at the end of this video that you can use to make your own judgments for your own play experience. If you'd be interested in supporting this content, please consider visiting my Patreon. Links in the video description. Patrons of this channel receive rewards like early, non-monetized access to these videos, an exclusive Discord community, and my top-level patrons play some D&D with me each month. Today I'd like to thank Adversity, Airhead, Rob, Anna, Aurelio Christian, Awesome Face, Ben Potts, Benjamin, Black, and Bloody Nine. Thank you all so much for your support. Let's get started. So what's wrong with blasting anyways? With blast spells, we can damage large numbers of enemies, perhaps even killing them, all with a single action and no concentration is required. That sounds amazing, and sometimes it does work that way, but only at certain levels with certain spells. It simply doesn't work from levels 1 through 20, and it seems as though it was designed to diminish in effectiveness as our levels increase. And today I'll show how dramatic the failure of these spells to keep up actually is. But first of all, I want to be clear what spells I'm referring to. Technically, any spell in D&D that deals damage could accurately be referred to as a blast spell. Chromatic Orb, Disintegrate, Blight, Spirit Guardians, Harm, Cloud of Daggers, these can all be referred to accurately as blast spells. But what I'm going to be talking about today are a certain type of blast spell. These are the spells our Evoker Wizard might grab, or our Draconic Sorcerer. These are the Fireballs, the Cones of Cold, and the Meteor Swarms of D&D. Specifically, I want to talk about spells that are available to our iconic Blaster mage build. Wizard and Sorcerer spells. These spells, they take an action to cast. They don't use concentration. They affect an area. They deliver damage once. These aren't spells with ongoing effects to hopefully several enemies. And delivering damage should be the primary purpose of these spells, even if they have other minor effects. So we're talking about cast, choose an area, roll damage dice, creatures roll save and take half damage on a successful save, or full damage on a failed save, and then they apply any relevant resistances, and we're done. Remove the spell slot. Those are the spells I'm talking about today. Most of these spells deliver an improved effect if we upcast them with a higher level slot. Typically, this is one more die of damage, so scaling spells with a higher die type of damage tend to improve more with upcasting. But one thing they all have in common is that mathematically, none of them upcast well at all. So let's talk about the base issues with these kinds of spells. First thing first, blast spells don't deliver as much damage as a lot of players think. When you grab 8d6s for that fireball, that feels like so many dice. I mean, if we use a weapon, we usually only have 1 or 2 dice, and that's just attacking one enemy. Here we get a pretty big pile of dice in our hand, and we don't even need to roll to hit. And we are, at least hopefully, hitting lots of creatures. However, that 8d6 is going to roll anywhere from 8 to 48. The average damage roll on a fireball is 28, but we're not going to get 28 points of damage on average. First, we get the saving throw. If that's successful, the damage falls to 14. Secondly, what about fire resistance or fire immunity? Fire's not uncommonly resisted, and we don't always know which monsters have those resistances or immunities until we find out the hard way. A fire-resistant creature is going to take 14 points of damage on average against a fireball if they fail their save, or a measly 7 damage if they succeed. Now what about damage boosts? Well, if we are a Draconic Sorcerer or an Evoker Wizard, depending on our level, we may be adding, +3 or +5 to the initial damage. This damage too will be reduced by saving throws and resistances. Even with a +5, a creature that makes their saving throw is still only going to take 16 points of damage on average from a fireball. Think about that. I mean, it's okay, but do you know how many hit points on average a challenge rating 5 monster has? 138. Even on a failed save with no resistances, we're talking between 20 to 25% of that creature's hit points. Now, I want to be clear here. I am not saying Fireball is a bad spell at 5th level. Heck, I've said multiple times before that it's a good spell at 5th level. And it is, because when it comes to clearing out lots of lesser enemies, it actually functions well in that regard. But let's be clear that no single enemy is taking a ton of damage from fireballs when you're 5th level. And a sharpshooter or a great weapon master may well be able to deliver more damage to that single enemy every round without using up those precious spell slots. This is why I've always said that these area of effect spells are terrible against a single enemy. Second thing to note about blasting spells is that D&D doesn't really have a system for damage that makes sense if you think about it. I mean, if you were to get burned within an inch of your life, you would not be in prime fighting condition. However, in D&D, wounding enemies does not reduce their ability to fight at all until you bring them to 0 hit points. Then it does a great job. If you reduce 4 creatures from, say, 100 hit points to 72 hit points, those creatures on their turn will be completely unhindered by that damage. When it comes to protecting your party or yourself from those enemy actions, blast spells really just don't match up with other spell options. But the big problem with these kinds of spells is when we talk about scaling. And yes, we can scale our blast spells by using a higher level slot. But other spells scale automatically without using a higher level slot. Think about it. Say a slow spell. If you cast it on a challenge rating 10 creature, it's way more effective than slow on a challenge rating 5 creature. But a fireball isn't. A haste on a 10th level rogue delivers more damage than a haste on a 5th level rogue. These spells are delivering more effective results as we increase in levels, but how much damage does the fireball do against a challenge rating 10 creature? Hit points keep scaling, but our damage doesn't, unless we use higher level spell slots. And even then, it doesn't even come close to keeping up. So part of the problem with these blast spells is they are getting worse and worse as we level up, while our other spells aren't. But as I said, Fireball at 5th level is still pretty good. You can hit a lot of enemies with it, and in the end you add up all that damage, a lot of hit points did get reduced. I take Fireball on those mid-level casters, and I'm usually satisfied with those results. For a while. But it never lasts because this game has been designed so it won't. So I always have to switch out that Fireball later. If I had taken something like Hypnotic Pattern, that's something I might have kept right until level 20. But Fireball, there is no point at all in casting a Fireball at level 20. It is insignificant. And look at your 3rd level spells. How many of them are still significant at 20th level? Fly is still useful. Fear is still useful. I mean, even rituals like Lehman's Tiny Hut or Phantom Steed are still useful at level 20. Fireball has become useless. When it comes down to why I consider blast spells an ineffective focus for a spellcaster, it's because there are moments, and I mean very specific moments in your career, where blasting feels pretty good. But if we look at our options from 1st through 20th level, most of the time, blasting lets us down, and the problems get worse as we increase in level. If we look on the spell list for the blast spells I'm talking about, area of effect spells that deliver damage primarily, once, without concentration, as an action, these are the top damage spells for each level. At level 1, it's Burning Hands for 3d6 damage. At level 2, it's Shatter, delivering 3d8 damage. Level 3, it's Fireball with 8d6. Level 4, it's Ice Storm, 2d8 plus 4d6. Level 5, we have Cone of Cold for 8d8. Level 6, we have Autoluke's Freezing Sphere for 10d6. Level 7, we have Firestorm for 7d10. At level 8, it's Abby Delzim's Horrid Wilting for 12d8. And at level 9, it's Meteor Swarm for 40d6. Now we have to keep in mind that the ranges, sizes, damage types, and saving throws of these spells are different, and there's no real way to account for that. But I will say that a higher level spell does not necessarily mean longer range, bigger area of effect, weaker saving throws, or more reliable damage types. But these are the average amounts of damage you will roll with each of these spells. Keep in mind, this is before saving throws or other defenses, so the actual average damage per target of these spells will definitely be lower than these numbers. But at level 1, it's 10.5. Level 2, 13.5. Level 3, it's 28. Level 4, it's 23. Yes, the number went down. Level 5, it's 36. Level 6 is 35. Yep, down again. Level 7, 38.5. Level 8, 54. Level 9, 140. Here's what it looks like on a graph. Now let's note some things here. This is just levels 1 through 8 on spell level, and we notice where we're sitting for 3rd level spells and where we're sitting at 7th level spells. This is 4 spell levels, so 8 character levels. Our level has more than doubled. It's nearly tripled, and our expected blast damage increased by about 38%. Using our most damaging spell, with our highest level slot. We have multiple levels where our damage goes down. And remember, this is 2 character levels. How is the best 4th level blast spell in the game doing less damage than our 3rd level spells? How disappointing is that? You go from 5th level to 7th level, get your brand new 4th level spells, and they're worse than the spells you already have. Now, I know the designers said they specifically took iconic spells like Fireball and boosted them a bit, but did Fireball need to be better than the best blast spell at 4th level? What's the point of having blast spells at 4th level if the 3rd level blast spells are better? And regardless of the little peak at level 3, what we're seeing here is a really, really disappointing increase. I mean, here's an ugly thought. What if we just scaled up a lousy shatter spell? So look at this. Yes, our new and fancy spells are delivering a bit more damage, but how much more? Not very much. Our lowly 2nd level spell, scaled in casting, for the most part keeps up. And Shatter does thunder damage, which is one of the more reliable damage types in the game. So, am I recommending upcasting Shatter? Absolutely not. Upcasting Shatter is a terrible idea. Here's why. Monster hit points increase every time their challenge rating increases. How much do they increase? About 15 hit points per challenge rating on average. So, if we're talking about 2 character levels to achieve 1 higher level slot, that's 1d8 damage before saving throw against 30 more hit points. Even if we were to assume a monster challenge rating only increased every other level, and that's a pretty big assumption, here's how our blasting damage compares. And here's our problem. Right here. Look at that green line. That's the rate in which monster hit points are increasing. And I'm increasing by 1 challenge rating per spell level. Look how that green line advances compared to our spell damage. Look how close we are in damage at level 1. And at level 3. There. Right there is a reason a Fireball feels effective at level 5, and Burning Hands feels effective at level 1. But look how our damage on spells advances compared to the monster hit points. Once we move beyond level 3, we see we're just getting more and more disappointing results. And our blast spells are going to be delivering a lower and lower percentage of monster hit points and damage. Now, I've been told Erupting Earth is a better option for scaling because it scales by d12s. But how well does it scale against monster hit points? How does it scale against upcasting a Fireball? So the red line represents Erupting Earth. The blue is Fireball, and the green are the increase in enemy hit points. So we can see that at level 3, Erupting Earth is bad. I mean, pretty embarrassingly bad compared to a Fireball. Then by level 7, it's doing more than an upcast Fireball. But is it effective? Look at that gap between Erupting Earth and the enemy hit point increases. It just gets bigger and bigger every level we go. Yes, it's outdamaging Fireball at level 7, but both spells are far more effective against a challenge rating appropriate enemy at the levels we first receive them, by a large margin. Each spell becomes less and less effective as we scale in level. It's just that Fireball is becoming less effective at a faster rate. Both spells are scaling absolutely horribly. So let's talk about Meteor Swarm. How good is Meteor Swarm? So the green line is our hit point increase, red is the Erupting Earth upcast, and the blue line is our best spells, concluding at Meteor Swarm at level 9. So take a look at that blue line. Now, imagine we're playing a blasting character. If it was me, I would feel pretty good at level 1. Blasts seem to be pretty effective. Level 3, I get Shatter, and I'll probably notice it doesn't seem quite as effective, but not terrible. Then level 5 comes around and I get Fireball, and I notice a lot of improvement. Once again, it's feeling pretty good to blast. Now, imagine levels 6 through 16. The blue line or the red line, that's our best possible damage with our blast spells, delivering less and less damage as a percentage of enemy hit points every level we increase. That means we're being less effective as a caster compared to the scaling of everything else in the game for 11 levels of play. Worse and worse every level we increase. Now, if you're fine with that, then blast away. If you're like me, that doesn't seem like a character I'd want to play to level 16. Now, get me to level 17, and I'll have that one big blast each day that feels great. But we've waited a long time for that. And so when I talk about blasting not scaling properly, this is what I'm talking about. Spells should be scaling closer to that green line, but instead we get this. Ice Storm, Cone of Cold, Freezing Sphere, Horrid Wilting. These spells are letting us down. They aren't performing how a spell of their level should be performing. As far as I'm concerned, there would have been a way to design these spells to fix these problems. First, these spells should be delivering a more robust scaling of damage by level. Apparently, the designers wanted Fireball and Lightning Bolt to stand out mechanically because they're so iconic. But you could do that and still have 4th level spells a bit better. Imagine the damage of these spells hit these red bars by level. Meteor Swarm would still feel special, but we would have these spells improving more consistently. We could still have Fireball and Lightning Bolt peak a little bit, and still have 4th level spells be better. Secondly, these spells should do more than damage. And in the cases where they already do more than damage, then those effects should be more pronounced or less circumstantial. Look at Synaptic Static. That has a secondary effect that makes the spell feel good when you cast it, even though the damage isn't all that impactful. What if Cone of Cold slowed creatures that fail their save, like the slow spell, but maybe just for one turn? What if Autoluke's Freezing Sphere created a frozen area on the ground that we treated like a giant grease spell? What if Abby Delzim's Horrid Wilting caused a level of exhaustion to those that fail their save? In addition to scaling damage, we can have a secondary effect that makes sense and feels good to the caster. And it doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be, as effective as a spell that doesn't deliver damage at all, of course. But that doesn't mean a 6th or 8th level spell can't have significant secondary effects without doing that. But I guess my point here is that a blasting focus for spellcasting is just not something I recommend. And this is why. Blasting is fine, but if it's our focus, then these are the results we should expect. Now, if you're fine with these numbers, then great. But I just want to be clear that you should decide if you're fine with these numbers before committing to this kind of focus for an entire campaign, because these are the numbers. But that said, I certainly enjoyed compiling them. It's been a blast. But that's it for today, and so until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. I'll talk to you soon.